In this second lesson on the CAGED system, I'm going to walk you through a detailed explanation and demonstration of the C chord in all 5 positions up the fretboard using the 5 forms of the CAGED system, the C, the A, the G, the E, and the D forms to make that happen. Additionally, we're going to include highlighted elements to show you the connections between each of the positions. The 5 positions are fixed, and these connections help you understand that fixed nature. C is always followed by the A form. A form is always followed by the G form, and so forth, right? And then when you get to the D form, it's always followed by the C form. You start all over again, demonstrating the circular nature of the CAGED approach to finding chords on the fretboard. Additionally, at the back end of this video, I'm going to walk you through the A, the G, the E, and the D chords up the fretboard for each of those, using the 5 forms to help you understand how that works. Now, I'm only going to cover that briefly, but included in the written material, if you have access to it, are 5 charts that show the C, the A, the G, the E, and the D chords in all 5 positions up the fretboard with highlighted connecting elements to show you the fixed nature of this system. Okay? So let's just get right to it. All right, first things first. Right here is a chart of the C chord in all 5 positions up the fretboard, and it also includes the octave position at the top. Now, what we're going to do, just as in part 1, is we're going to be very deliberate in presenting the material so that those of you who are young in your guitar journey will also be able to embrace and understand what's going on here. The CAGED system isn't difficult to understand, but it can get confusing really fast sometimes. All right? So, what we're also going to do in order to help alleviate any confusion and to help clarity is we're going to show you connections so that when you're moving between one form and another form, what is the thing that helps you understand which form follows which? Okay? So, you'll understand all of this very clearly as we move forward. So let's just get right into it. We're outlining the C chord in all 5 positions up the fretboard. So your native position is this first position, right? The cowboy chord, C. Nothing more really needs to be said about this, all right? This is just your point of reference, the starting place. What I want you to really pay attention to is right there. That's C on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Now we have the root at the 3rd fret in the open native form of the C. Now you'll notice in the diagram we're playing the A form. Well, as you remember, you play an A chord with your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers, and you put your 1st finger across the nut. Now, in the diagram, it says the root is at 3. Well, we know the open A is the root, so we move that up 3 frets. We're now playing at the 3rd fret of the 5th string, that's the root, C, and then we play the rest of the A chord, like so. Now, as said before, we don't usually use these 3 fingers. We usually use just the 3rd finger to play the A form of the C chord. All right? Now, you'll notice we started with C. Now we're playing the A form. You will see as we move forward, we're actually walking through the acronym, CAGED. That is the order of the forms moving up the fretboard. Now, in order to help keep it even more clear, let's show you the connection, which we've been actually talking about. If you look at the diagram, you'll see the red box is highlighting the connection between the C form course, I have to tune up my guitar. And the A form. And it is that C at the 3rd fret of the 5th string. That's what binds these two forms together. So the C form will always be followed by the A form. And this root here on the 5th string that is shared by both the C form and the A form is your connection that ensures and guarantees that fixed order. All right? Now, let's move on to the next C chord up the fretboard. The next version of the C chord is using the G form. So as you know, we have the G form that we play with our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers. Then we put our 1st finger across the nut. And then in the diagram, it says this finger, your 1st finger, is up at the 5th fret. So we move everything up and we play the G form of the C chord. Now you'll notice your root here is at the 8th fret of the 6th string. And again, nobody actually plays this whole form, so we play a modified version as we discussed in part 1. So your 1st finger remains where it was to begin with, and we can play with the 8th fret root on the 6th string. We can jettison that one because we also have a root here on the 3rd string at the 5th fret. And just bring the 3rd finger back in and play that version. Now, if you want, you can play the top end of it and add another root right here on the 8th fret of the 1st string. It's up to you how you want to approach that. But all 3 versions of the modified G form are still the G form being employed of the C chord. All right? So, let's talk about connections. Now, between the A form and the G form, of which I'm just going to play a modified version, you'll notice the box highlights the 5th fret notes, these 3 notes. When you're playing the A form of the C chord, you're using your 3rd finger. When you're playing the G form of the C chord, you're using your 1st finger. So whether you're playing that, or that, it doesn't matter. Your 1st finger sits right there in the same place using the same 3 notes. So now we know the A form is always followed by the G form. And we know that for a fact because of these 3 notes right there on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string. That's your connection. This is what ties the A form to always be followed by the G form. All right? Now, let's move on to the next form of the C chord up the fretboard. I just wanted to drop in here real quick and say, if you didn't quite understand something, feel free to rewind and review. You can also look at the written material if you have it, and look there too, all right? So I just thought I'd remind you, you can review, rewind, and watch again as many times as you need. That's the wonders of technology. The next form of the C chord is the E form. Well, we know an E chord is way down here. We switch to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers and lay our 1st finger across the nut. Now, in this diagram, we're told 8th fret for your 1st finger, so up to the 8th fret, right? Your root is right there at the 6th string and the 8th fret. Pretty cool. Yes, it's the full bar chord. I think we mentioned that in part 1 as well. And so now let's look at the connection. If you look at the diagram, you'll see that the red box is highlighting the root tone on the 8th fret of the 6th string in both the G form and the E form. So we use the modified version of the G form with the root on the bottom, which is the C at the 8th fret of the 6th string, to tell you that that is your connection between the G form and the E form. So it is reasonable to say that the G form will always be followed by the E form because it is now a fixed relationship. This is what we've been reiterating. The order is fixed. If you've already figured it out, we're following the acronym CAGED up the fretboard. C is always followed by A form, is always followed by the G form, is always followed by the E form. And so you can guess the final form that is going to be shown here in just a second, right? Okay, let's get to it. All right, our final form is the D form, as you can see. We play a D, and we know we replace our fingering and use our first finger in place of the nut. And we see in the diagram, our first finger goes all the way up to 10. So there we go. And if you want, you can add in the 5th string note. And there is your D form of the C chord with your root at the 10th fret of the 4th string. Now, let's look at some connections. As you look at the diagram, you'll notice the red box is covering the notes at the 10th fret in both the E form and the D form. So right here, 5th string, and the 4th string of the 10th at the 10th fret. Now, while the E form technically has its root here at the 8th fret of the 6th string, we're going to focus on the 10th fret of the 4th string root, because that is the technical connector between the E form and the D form. Because we don't always play the 5th string note, we want to be sure that we understand this root at the 10th fret on the 4th string is the actual connector. All right? So this further reinforces the fixed order of the forms as you're seeking a given chord up the fretboard. E form is always followed by the D form. What I want to do now is I want to show you the octave of the C form. We have the C form in its native state at the very beginning of this lesson. Now I want to show you how it sits up at the octave position. Remember, you normally play a C chord with your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fingers. I'm just doing it here at the 12th fret because that's where we're at. And remember, you then, as we showed in part 1, you replace your fingering with your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers, and then you lay your 1st finger across the nut, and then as you move it up the fretboard, say to the D chord we had you play, using the C form in part 1, your 1st finger acts like a capo or in place of the nut, so that you can play this C voicing in D. Now, the reason I am showing you the octave of the C is because I want to show you the connection between the D form and the C form, all right? As you look at the diagram, you'll notice that there are now 2 frets worth of notes being covered in the red box. The 12th and 13th fret notes right here. And you'll recognize that as the D shape. But, of course, when you play the D form, you're actually using your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers. Now, when you switch to the C form, you're actually taking those same 3 notes and playing them with your 1st and 2nd finger, because your 3rd and 4th finger are covering the bottom parts of the chord, right? So, now the reason I want to show you this connection is because when you're trying to find other chords apart from the C, say maybe an E or a G, you're going to be using the D form and the C form lower down on the fretboard, you need to know the D form is always followed by the C form. And so we come full circle. And if you do come full circle, in the manner of speaking, from the C, it's always followed by the A form, which is always followed by the G form. It doesn't matter where you start on the fretboard. Whatever form you're playing, say E form, that's always going to be followed by the D form. If you're playing the A form, that's always going to be followed by the G form. And you need to know the connections between them so you will get them properly understood, how they fit together, like a jigsaw puzzle of sorts, right? Okay, there you go. Okay, let's do a super quick review of what you went over so far in this lesson, because it's a lot of information. So we're going to kind of condense it right here. We started with the C chord in the native position, in the open position. Then we showed you the A form, because A always follows C. Remember, we're following the acronym CAGED with regard to the order of the forms. So we showed you the A form. Then we showed you the connection. It's the C root at the 3rd fret on the 5th string. Then we showed you the G form of the C chord. And then we highlighted the connection between the A form and the G form. And that's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings right here where you're overlapping, right? So that's your connection. Then we showed you the E form of the C chord and showed you the connection between the G and the E form. And it's right there at the 8th fret, that C on the 6th string. All right. Then we showed you the D form of the C chord, because D always follows E with regard to forms. And then we showed you the connection, which technically is right here on the 4th string at the 10th fret. It's a C, right? Right, there it is. Then we showed you the octave of the C chord using the C form. And we did that to show you the connection between the D and the C forms. And that's right here, these 3 notes over 2 frets. Now, when you play the C form here in the octave, this is the root, which means you now can go to the A form, because it's the same connection as down here, right? So that helps identify the circular nature of the caged system approach. And we'll highlight that a little bit more here in just a moment. For now, pause the video and go ahead and go over the C chord in all 5 positions up the fretboard. All right? Then, when you're ready to continue, restart the video and we'll keep going. I'm going to very quickly go over the A chord up the fretboard, the G chord up the fretboard, the E chord up the fretboard, and the D chord up the fretboard. If you have the written material, I have 5 charts that you can follow along with, and I've highlighted the connections on those charts as well. So you have all 5 charts for all 5 chords running up the fretboard. We went through the C already, so now let's go through the A real quick, and I'm just going to zoom through this and you'll see what I'm talking about. Start with the A native, you go to the G form, to the E form, to the D form, to the C form, back to the A form at the octave, and then if you want to keep going, a modified G form. Okay? Now, the G chord. Here it is, native. G is followed by E. Remember, we're going through the acronym CAGED. That's the order of the forms. No matter what chord you start with, whatever form you're starting with, the next form that follows is the one that follows whatever form you're playing. Here we're playing the G, so it's always followed by the E form, which is always followed by the D form, then the C form, the A form, and then back to the octave G form. Whoops. And then we have the E form, and then if we wanted, we could play the D form way up here, right? It just keeps going. And this re-emphasizes the circular nature of the CAGED system. Okay, so now E chord, right? What comes after E? C-A-G-E-D. So we play the D form. Then we play the C form, the A form, the G form, and then back to the octave of the E form. And then if we want to keep going, the D form. And I'm not even going to try the C form above that. Okay, now the last chord, D. Here it is native. What follows D? Well, we start over again. C, right? So C, the A form, the G form, the E form, back to the octave of the D form, and then the C form, and the A form, and I'm not even going to try the G form. But you see the idea here. The progression of forms is unchanging, no matter what chord you start with. All right, now, I don't have this written down, but for example, you could start with C sharp. And that's at the 4th fret of the 5th string. That's your C sharp root. And we're playing the A form. So what follows the A form? The G form. So we know that's our connection. So put your finger there, then play the rest of the G form. Right? What follows the G form? Well, the E form. So you find your C sharp there. And there's your E form of the C sharp. What follows the E form? The D form. So here is our D form of the C sharp. And then we have the C form of the C sharp, right? It doesn't matter where you start. Let me start with, say, a B flat in the E form. Now, the cool thing here is I have room behind, so I can go backwards. Behind the E form is the G form of the B flat. And we can even play the A form, okay? Pretty cool, huh? Now, B flat in the E form, then we go to the D form, and then we go to the C form, and then the A form, which we played down here, right? Behind the G form to get to the E form, right? I know I'm going quick, so if you need to rewind, that's okay. Do that and you'll get it. So this is what's cool about this. You can start anywhere with any given form, and it just continues through the progression. What form are you on? C, A, G, E, or D? Again, if you're on the G form of a chord, the next form that you play is the E form. Find your connection, right? And then you know where to play it. And that's how it works. It's pretty cool stuff, all right? So pause the video, and if you have the written material, go over it, review it, and play along to it, and follow it, and find your connections. Reinforce what they are so that you'll always know, all right? And you'll never need a chart again. Then, when you're done and ready to continue, go ahead and press play, and we'll wrap it up. Wait a minute. I heard you say something. Somebody out there said something about, wait a minute, talk to me more about that thing behind the position you're playing. How does that work? Well, let me show you. All right, I mentioned a moment ago in passing that you could play positions behind where you're playing. So for example, let's say you have, you're playing here at the 7th fret and you're playing the E form of the B and the A form of the E chord, and you're just doing a, right? And that's your progression. Now, we're in the E form. So you have all this real estate. So where are your other Bs? Behind where you're playing. All right, so, well, we're on the E form. So what you do is you work backwards. What comes before E? G. Okay, well, let's play the G form of the B. And what comes before G? A. Okay, we play the A form of the B. And we can do it with the E chord too. Here's your E in the A form. What comes before A? C. So you can play the C form of the E. And what comes before the C form? The D form of the E. So you have all these wonderful options available, right? So you can play the progression. Let's use the G form and the C form, right? Right? And we can modify the G form. We can even modify the C form by leaving that root off, because here we have a root, so we could actually do this. So a little bit different. Okay, we can even leave that off and just play the second, third, and fourth strings. Right? And you can go to the A form, play a modified C without that. So that's what I mean, playing behind the position where you normally are typically playing, using the E and the A forms. You can actually now, knowing the E form is preceded by the G form, preceded by the A form, you have options available to you now, right? And that's the whole idea. And the same thing with the E chord. A form, well, there's the C form, then there's the D form, right? And then there's the native open. And that's what I mean, basically, is you just work backwards through the CAGED. Instead of going C, A, G, E, D, you do D, E, G, A, C, D, E, G, A, C, depending on where you are. The higher up on the neck you are, the more real estate you have to work behind. E form of the D, G form of the D, A form of the D, C form of the D, native D. Okay, so if you're up here, work it out down here. Play it backwards, even play starting with using that root, right? So there's these really cool things you can do. Now, I hope that's not terribly confusing, but that's what I meant when I was talking about all that real estate behind that you can take advantage of. Playing the exact same licks, just using different voicings, different forms of the chords, all right? And this is one of the strengths of the the CAGED system, is it gives you options where you can play other voicings or forms of any given chord, all right? There you go. All right, there you have it. Now, I know that last little segment had a lot of information thrown out really fast, and I totally get it. Rewind it, listen to it again, and listen to it a third time if you need to. You'll get it. Now, what I want you to do is take the 5 charts, if you have access to the written material, and really study them. Look at the connections, and you will see, no matter which of the 5 charts you're looking at, it doesn't matter. C is always followed by the A form. The C form is always followed by the A form, which is always followed by the G form. It doesn't matter which chord you're playing, whether it's an E flat, a B flat, a C sharp, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. It's the progression of the forms that is what matters, and that will show you the location of any given chord anywhere on the fretboard. I demonstrated that a little bit for you so you get a grasp of what that's all about, all right? And then the whole behind the position you're playing, where other versions of the chords you're playing exist, if you're higher up on the fretboard, absolutely pay attention to that as well. This is the deeper stuff of the caged system that you're able to take advantage of if you're aware that it actually exists, okay? And that's critical. Okay, like I say all the time, take your time here. There's no rush. Get this stuff clear in your head before you move forward. And the next lesson, when you take it on, will be all that more easily understood. Okay? So when you get there, I'll be there. See you then. Hey, thanks for watching. If you press the little red button down there in the corner, you'll be subscribed to Outsmart Your Guitar. If you then hit the notification bell, you'll be informed when we upload new material, which is usually around once a week. Below the video in the description, you will see a link that will take you to where you can download a PDF of the lesson material that accompanies this video. All lessons contain a link to give you access to the written material for that lesson. Below that, you will see a link to Patreon Outsmart Your Guitar, where I have a lot of material that isn't included here. So you may want to check that out. There's 2 levels of subscription. I'd really appreciate if you would become a patron by subscribing at one of the 2 levels and help support my efforts to continue to provide high quality lesson material for you to help you learn, play, and grow to become the guitar player you desire to be. All right. Thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hey, we'll see you soon.